Hello friends, welcome to Banker Zone. In this session, we will learn definition, importance and limitation of statistics, data collection, classification and tabulation. Okay, now start with the evolution of statistics. So basically, the statistics word is derived from the Latin word statisticum, the Italian word statistia and the German word statistics. And each of which means statisticum, statistia or statistics means simply it is a group of number or the group of figure that represent the human interest, right? So the number of group number, the number of groups or the number of figure which represent the human interest, which means simply the statisticum, statistia or the statistics. Okay, so see the historical use of the statistics. So previously only the kings were using the statistics mainly to collect some facts about their state, like what is the revenue collection, then add about the administration or the politics. So in early stages only kings were using the statistics for basic function to run the state. Now the professor Achenwell in 1749 first time used the word statistics. Who used first time the word? Professor Achenwell in 1749 used the word statistics. He defined statistics as the political science of many countries. As per the professor Otfrier Achenwell, he defined the statistics as the political science of many countries. Now slowly there was a gradual expansion in the use of the statistics. So it was used mainly in the colleges, hospitals and sports. In colleges, like to analyze the marks obtained by the students. In hospitals, like the data about number of patients they are having, what is the mortality rate, like that. In sports, like to know the game statistics, right? So these are the where how gradually the use of statistics increased. Now in today's world, we can say there is increased or widened use of the statistics, like in commerce, economies, social sciences, other sciences, medicines, planning, politics, different businesses, in the banking also. Lot of use of statistics. What is statistics? Simply, statistics simply it is nothing but the numbers, right? So what do you mean by the data? Simply, data can be of two types. One is the qualitative data, another is the quantitative data, right? So what is qualitative? Qualitative means which cannot be expressed in number. For example, your eye of color of your eye, what is your opinion, what is your category, right? That you should explain, right? So the data which cannot be expressed in numbers, generally it is qualitative data. Quantitative means simply which can be expressed in number, like age, revenue, height, etc., right? So what do you mean by statistics? Statistics means simply it is a quantitative or a numerical data used for further calculation, right? So one thing you remember, in statistics we always deal with the numbers, right? We are not worried about the quality of the nature. We only focus on the what are the quantitative data or the numerical data we are having, and we will use it for the further calculation. That is all nothing but the simply the statistics. Okay, now see in detail. The word statistics basically derived from the Latin word statisticum, Italian word statistia and the German word statistics, each of which means simply what it means. Simply it is a group of number or the group of figure which represent the some information about the human interest. So the term statistics first used by the professor Achenwell in 1749 when he was referring subject matter as a whole. Achenwell has also defined the statistics as it is a political science of many country. It is a political science of many country. Earlier the statistics were mainly used by the kings, right? Now we are using it in the businesses, like commerce, in commerce, economics, social sciences, politics, planning, medicine, etc., etc. Okay, this is all about the introduction part. Okay, now see there are four phases of statistical data analysis. Okay, see when you are having data, you have to do, if you have to analyze the data, you have to follow the four stages, right? First is very simple. You need to collect the data, right? So collection of data is important. You need to collect the data. Once you collect the data, you have to classify it and you have to make the tables, right? So raw data you will get, you have to classify it, you have to make the tables out of it so that it will be visually good for the representation. That is what the representing the data, right? Very simple. Next is analysis of data. Once you have made the table, then you can apply the formula and method so that you can do the analysis of that data, right? Then lastly you have to do the interpretation of the data. Means what? Simply whatever you have analyzed, from that you have to interpret and get the result to reach the conclusion, right? Very simple. Remember the stages, right? First is simply the collection of the data. First stage is collection of data, second is classification and tabulation, third analysis of data, and lastly we are having interpretation of data. Now see where we can use the statistics. Very simple. See, in medical and clinical research it is used, right? How what can be the optimal treatment combination. For that we can use the statistics. In businesses and the economy, it can be used for managing the strategy and the planning, right? So in stock market also it is used to predict the or to forecast the future price of the shares, right? So it will be useful to determine based on the regression. You can use what can be the future price, right? That in stock market you can predict the price of the shares in the future. Okay. In banking also it is widely used, right? For example, to decide the CIBIL score of customer, the various factors are there, like history of it, like different factors are there. So based on that we have to apply some statistical formulas there to get the CIBIL score. In stock market also it is used, right? In sports and performance also it is used. In weather forecasting it is mainly used in weather forecasting, right, to predict whether there will be rain or not. So these are the different applications of the statistics. Okay, no need to mug up anything, just for your understanding purpose. Okay, now see in detail, there are 4 phases of the statistical data analysis. First is the collection of data. So in that first is simply the numerical data. Obviously in statistics we only deal with the numerical data. So in the form of number, data is collected from the different sources. It will be in the form of raw data. The next is the classification and tabulation. So once we get the raw data, we will divide it into the different groups or different classes, that is called classification, and we will represent the data in the form of table. That is what this is tabulation, right? Classification means simply segregation, tabulation means making the table. Then in third stage, analysis of data. So based on that classified and tabulated data, we will analyze it using the different formula and the method. And lastly, interpretation of data means simply this is the final stage. So at that stage we will draw the conclusion, right, after the data analysis. It is the interpretation of data. Okay, now next is the importance of statistics. So why statistics basically is important? So statistics basically teaches us how to deal with the data, that is how to collect the data, how to represent the data, how to analyze the data, and how to interpret the data, right? Apart from that, statistics are widely used in medical, sports, weather forecasting, stock markets, quality testing, then the policy, banks, educational or the research organization, and the different businesses and the economy, or even the government decision also uses the statistics, right? So this is why we need the statistics. Okay, now further, what are the functions of statistics? See, first function is what? It presents the facts in definite form. Means what? Definite data. It will tell you 10.6 means 10.6, right? No variation. That means it gives the result in or the fact in the definite form. Simplify the complex data. So you are having lot of raw data. You will apply the different stages like collection of data, then classification, tabulation, analysis, interpretation. So you can classify the complex data into the simple graphs. Okay, it provides technique of comparison. You are having 2 data, right? So you can compare that. So it provides the technique for the comparison, right? So based on the merit performance, you can compare the data. Study relationship between variables. So if you are having 2 or more variable, right, you can use the correlation. Correlation is the part of statistics, right? So how that variables are basically related, you will get the idea. Next, help in formulating the policy. So when you are making some policy, right, so you are having the decision making capability, that must be the analytical, right? That means when you are deciding the policy of the bank or policy of any organization, it must be driven by the data analysis. So it help into formulating the policy. It help in forecasting the outcome, right? So based on the history, you can find the trend, what can be the future prediction, right? So you can get the forecasting. It help basically to find the future outcome. Now what are the limitations or the demerit of the statistics? So we are having lot of benefit. Now what are the demerit, right? So it does not deal with the individual value. Always remember, when we talk about the statistics, it is not worried about the individual value, right? It talk about the average. For example, we have to find the average height. So we will have to take the average height, and on that we can apply the formula. But for individual data point, it is not being considered in the statistics. Does not study qualitative data. Means what? It does not study the qualitative, means it only focus on the number. It does not worry about what is the quality of it. Only how many see, statistics is a game of number. It does not consider the quality. Okay, result true only on the average. Means what? When we talk about the individual value, see, always remember, statistics is not for the individual value. It always apply for the average value, right? So obviously results are true only on average, not for the individual. Okay, results can be biased. So obviously when we are choosing some samples, right, from the out of total data, obviously you can choose the favorable data, and it can become the biased collection of data result into the useless result. So you will get the bad result, right? So these are the limitations. Okay, now see in detail what are the functions of statistics. Statistics represent the fact into the definite form. It simplifies the complex data. It provides technique of the comparison. It also study the relationship between the variable. It help into the formulating the policy and forecasting the outcome, that is the future prediction. Okay, so these are the function. Now what are the limitations and demerits? See, statistics does not deal with the individual, right? Why? Because statistical method cannot be applied for the individual value. Statistics is the study of the mass or the group of observation, so it does not deal with the individual. Statistics does not study the qualitative nature of data, right? Statistical method cannot be applied for the qualitative or the non-numerical data, so it only considers the numbers. Statistics give the result only on average. So see, a part of data means what? Simply the sample is being collected to draw the conclusion, right? So the result obtained not exactly same if we analyze the whole data, because we are in statistics, we take the sample and from that sample we draw the conclusion. So if we select the sample wrongly, so such a result means basically in statistics give it result only on average, right? Results can be biased, so it may happen that result can be biased, like the data collection may be sometime biased, so which will make the whole investigation useless, right? So these are the limitations and the demerit of the statistics. Very easy. I repeat, what are the demerits? Very simple. See, does not deal with the individual value, does not study the quality of the data, it gives result only on the averages, and result can be biased. Now see, the concept of population and the sample. So what do you mean by population? See, one thing you remember, only one thing you remember. Population means what? Whatever all the data you're having, it is called population. Very simple. Entire group is called as population, all the data, right? For example, weight of all the men in India, it is what? The population. Now what is sample? Sample is always the part of the population. For example, see, it is a part of population representing the population, right? So out of that we have selected only some few part, it is called as sample. Name it is indicating sample. So it is simply the selected group. So all the data is the population, part of the data is simply the sample. Okay. Now one thing you remember, when we talk about the population, whatever the numerical value representing that population is called as the parameter. Whatever the numerical value which represent the sample is called as the statistics. So one thing, very simple idea I will give you. See, P for parameter, P for population, S for sample, S for statistics. In that way remember. So parameters are always for the population and sample statistics are always for the samples, right? So population, there is parameter, for sample there is statistics. Okay. Apart from that, see, what do you mean by the variates? If we classify the data, based on the characteristics of that data, we are having two categories. One is called variates, another is the attribute. See, name it is indicating. Attribute means what? Simply it represents like some characteristics, right? For example, one thing you remember, attribute means simply like a character, right? Meaning of attribute itself, it is a character. So when the data is in qualitative nature, right? So which it cannot be expressed in the form of number, right? For example, what is the color of ball? What is your religion? You have to speak, right? You cannot give the numbers, right? So the color of ball, the religion of human, these are the data which you need to speak, which you cannot quantify it, right? So no numbers cannot represent it. Number cannot represent the attributes. That's why it is the qualitative in nature. Whereas simply it is a quantitative in nature. It is numerical data. For example, what is your height? Right? What is your salary? What is your height? What is your mass? Right? These are what? These are the number. So always remember, variates means simply the numerical data, and attributes means simply the non-numerical data. So numerical data, variates, further we can classify into two categories. One is the discrete variable, and third is another is the continuous variable. So what is discrete means? It will give the individual value. Discrete means what? Simply this is the discrete, it will give the individual value. Continuous means it will have some range, right? So discrete means what? For example, number of member in your family, obviously it will be the 4 or 5. So number of accident happen, it can be definite number. Age in year, it is definite number, right? It is a discrete variable. So one thing you remember, discrete variable is always countable and finite. You cannot say my age is 22.5. You cannot say my age is 22.375. right? How many accidents happen there? You cannot say 3.5 accident happen, right? That means it is giving countable and the finite number. However, continuous is give you the fractional number, or there will be the range. For example, if I say what is your height, you can say 172.3, you can say 174.15. That means there can be the fractional value, so it is called as the continuous value, and it will always falls within some range. How many percentage of marks you have obtained? It can be 85.67, it can be 85.1. So you can have like a 40.1, 40.2, 40.2. That means many numbers can generate the value, right? It is called as the continuous variable, right? So the percentage of mark can be from 1.1 to 1.57, like that. So number of value from 0 to 100, including the fractions, it will give the value called as the continuous variable. Very simple, right? Now see further. See in detail, what do you mean by population? Simply, the population means simply the entire collection of data, entire collection of observation is nothing but the population. It is the entire group. Okay, for example, we are finding the weights of all males in India, right? Now, what is sample? Sample is the part or a group of unit of a population. Means what? If we collect some part of out of the population, it will be sample. For example, weight of a man only who are born on say 15th of August. So on 15th of August, whatever men born, who will collect them. So population is all the data. Part of a population becomes the sample. Very simple. So if it is a population, so it can be the sample, right? Okay. Now see what is a parameter. So the numerical value which represent the population is called as the parameter. So parameter is the numerical value which describe characteristics of the population. So parameter is usually unknown value. For example, say population means, so you are having a lot of data. If you take the average of it, it will say mu. So it will be the parameter. If we, so out of that population, we have selected this is the sample, right? Small size. So numerical value that describe characteristics of the sample. So if we find the average of it, it becomes this x bar. So that will be the representing that will be called statistics. So very simple. One thing you remember, no need to worry. When we do some numerical calculation on the population, we will call it as a parameter. When we do the numerical calculation on the sample, we will call it as the statistics. Very simple. One thing simply remember. For population, the term is parameter. For a sample, the term is statistics, right? So very simple. We have to see detail in the next chapter. Okay, no need to worry here. Just the introduction part. Now further. What do you, so if we have to classify the data, we have already learned based on the characteristics, we can classify the data into variates and the attribute, right? So variates are those data which vary from one individual to another individual, which can be expressed into the numerical terms. It's called as the variate. For example, the price of commodity, height, weight, mass. So the data which you can represent in the form of number. Attribute simply which cannot be expressed in the form of numerical data. It's called as attribute, right? For example, the color of ball, religion of human, etc. Very simple. Now further, if we see one thing, variate is the quantitative data and attribute is the qualitative data. So often variate is also called as the quantitative data, it is the numerical data. So the quantitative data or the variate, further we can classify into the discrete or the continuous variable. Discrete variable means it will have the finite number. For example, number of member in the family, your age in year. Now continuous data means what? Simply continuous variable means simply the variable which take the infinite or a many number of value within the defined range. For example, what is your percentage of your mass? So it can be 75.1, it can be 75.2, it can be 75.53. So it will have a lot of value from 0 to 100, right? So it will have the lot of or many or infinite value. Infinite here represent many value it will give you, right? So height can be your 5.5, 5.1.2. That means you are having a lot of number. Weight can be there, right? So weight can be 70.1, it can be 70.2, it can be 70.25, like that. That means it will have the many value. So discrete means simply the indefinite value, and continuous means within a range it will fall, right? Okay. Now see the collection of data. So we talk about the collection of data. So there can be the two type of data. First is the primary data and second is the secondary data. So when we talk about the primary data, right, it is simply directly collected first time from the respondent or the informer or giving information. The person giving information from whom you collected the data first time called primary data. So there are two methods to collect the data. Direct interview method. You can ask face to face the question, or you can conduct the interview, you will get the data. Or you can have some questionnaire. The survey will be conducted, people will fill the form and you will get the data, right? Secondary data means it is simply the second hand information. So data already collected and processed by some agency is called as the secondary data. So when you are getting data at a second hand, means second time you are getting the data, right? It can be processed or not processed. It is called secondary data. So according to the layer, the secondary data are those which already in existence, which have been collected for some purpose. Now, from where you can get the secondary data? See, if there are published or unpublished report, for example, given by WHO, UNESCO, LIC, or research organization, it will be the source of secondary data. If a bank giving some financial result annually, the magazine published or the internet, these are the data, these are the sources of secondary data. Very easy, right? Now see, what are the difference between the primary and secondary data? See, primary data is always the data which is collected for the first time, and the data collected through the published or unpublished sources is the secondary data. Right, so primary data is also called as the raw data. Okay, primary data for one person become the secondary for all other. So for first time it reaches the person, it will be primary for him. If he circulate further, it will become secondary for the others. Right. Now see, what do you mean by census? See, census means simply the data collected for all individual unit in the population. For you are having lot of population, right? So for example, you are finding the average weight of each person. It will be the part of census. Now, what is sample survey? Out of that, you select the sample and for them, you find the average weight. So, data collected for a sub part of sample, it is called from the population, is called as the sample survey. So, always remember, if we talk about the population and for each value in the population you are counting, it will be the part of census, right? And out of that, if you collect the sample, then it will be the part of survey. So, always remember one thing. For population, there will be the census, and for survey, for sample, there will be the survey. For population, we are considering each and every value from the population, it becomes census. If we consider part of value, if we are considering the value from the sample, it will become the survey. So, census represent mainly the all the population, all the unit in the population, and survey is representing the units in the sample. Okay. Now, see, we have already learned there are two types of data. One can be the primary data, another is secondary data. Primary data means simply the data which is collected directly or first time from the respondent or the informants. Primary data collection, we are having methods. First is the direct interview method. So here face-to-face interview will be conducted to get the data. And in another is questionnaire. So we will have some survey. So there will be some questions. It can be multiple choice questions to get the data. Okay. Second, we have the secondary data. Secondary data means simply the data, right, which are second hand information. So data which have already been collected and processed by some agency or the person is called and collected for the second time. So data which is collected for second time called as the secondary data. For example, say data collected from the existing records or the different published or unpublished sources, like can be the WHO, UNESCO, LIC, they publish the different report, right? It will become the secondary data. So banks, financial institution, or from internet you get the data. It is the part of secondary data. Okay. Now, see one thing. According to layer, what is the secondary data? So the secondary data, those are those already in existence and which have been collected for some other purpose. So the data which is already existed and which is collected already for other purpose, right? It is called as the secondary data as per the layer. Very, very important for exam point of view. So data which is being collected for some other purpose is called as the secondary data as per the layer. Okay. Now, what is the difference between primary and secondary data? We have already learned that primary data is always collected for the first time because it's primary, right? And secondary data is we are getting from the published or unpublished different sources. Primary data become the secondary data for other. The primary data becomes secondary data for other if it is in possession of one individual. If I am having the data, I have given it to you, right? So for me it is a primary, but for you it becomes secondary, right? For example, say the population census report has been prepared and primarily it is given to the Registrar General of India. So for registrar it becomes the primary, for it will be secondary for all others, right? Primary data is original and it will be directly collected from the respondent. So obviously it will be the original and more accurate, right? So primary data is original and more accurate than the secondary data. However, collecting primary data is more costly and time consuming also as compared to the secondary data. Okay. Now, data classification. See, raw data. If you are having a lot of raw data, it does not give you the clear picture and interpreting the raw data become difficult, right? So that's why we need to classify the data. For example, see, What is the classification? The method of arranging the data into groups or the classes by common characteristics of the data, right? For example, say if you are working in a post office, right? You are having lot of letters. So you distribute the letter as per the city. How many will go to the Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, and Kolkata? So based on the city is a common characteristics. So lot of letters you divide as per the city, right? Further, you can divide in each city at which area the letters are supposed to go, right? So letters are classified according to the city, and further they are arranged as per the streets, right? So this is simply the classification, right? Now after the classification, you have to prepare the table. Tabulation means simply you need to prepare the table so that it will look attractive and it will give the clear idea, and it will be easy for the interpretation and comparison. So once you classify the data, you need to prepare the table so that from the looking at table itself, you will get the idea. For example, in Delhi, MG Road, we have to deliver 3 letters like that. Very easy. So preparing Excel sheet, basically it is like a tabulation, right? Very easy. Now further, there are 4 important bases of classification. See, if you have to classify the data, there must be some base. So there are 4 important bases on which you can classify the data. First is the qualitative base, second is the quantitative, third is geographical, and fourthly is the temporal or the chronological. Now with respect to the qualitative base, see, when we classify the data based on some quality, right? So which you cannot express in numbers, it is called as the qualitative data or qualitative base. For example, what is your sex, male, female, the religion, Hindu, Muslim, literacy, illiterate, literate. So these are the data which you can need some quality to describe, right? These are the qualitative base. So quantitative base means simply the data is classified according to the numbers. It is called quantity. For example, height, weight, age, income, mass. So which can be represented in the form of number is called as the quantitative base. Now what is the geographical base? Simply, so if you classify the data based on geographies, for example, what is the population of Maharashtra? What is the population of city Mumbai? What is the, say, in which country there is maximum female? So if you classify the data based on geography, it will be the geographical base. Now what is the chronological or temporal base? So if data is classified as per the time of occurrence, for example, year, month, week, days. So when we talk about the time is important with respect to classification of data, it is a chronological or the temporal base. For example, say, what is the profit of your State Bank of India in the financial year 25? So we talk about the particular year, right? So what is the profit of the Punjab National Bank in Q3? So this is what the classification as per the chronological or temporal base. Now, if we talk about the classification of data, we can classify further it as a one-way classification, two-way classification, and multi-way classification. What is a one-way classification? Means only one filter will be applicable. You are having lot of data, right? If you are having the population of India, right? So we apply only one filter. For example, out of total population, what is the Hindu population in India? That is what the one-way classification. Two-way means here you will apply the two filter. For example, if you are having lot of data, right, and you will classify, for example, the population, right? So out of the total population, you will find out of total population of India, what are the Hindu and which are male, right? So further, out of one way, two way will be further filtered, right? So in multi-way, you will apply more than two filter. For example, if you are having the population of India, right? So you will say what are the Hindu which are a male and which are literate. So further you are applied more than two filter. So only one filter means one way classification, two way means two filter, and multi-way means more than two filter you apply to classify the data, right? Very simple. Now see, we have already learned, right? What is the classification? See, raw data does not give any clear picture about and you cannot, it is very difficult to draw a conclusion from the raw data. That's why we need to do the classification and the tabulation. What is the classification? Based on some common characteristics, we will classify the data. We will make the groups, we will make the classes. For example, sorting of letter in a post office. What is tabulation? Simply representing data in more organized way to get clear a picture and make it easier for the interpretation. It is called as a tabulation, right? Classification means simply here we will make the groups, right? And after that, tabulation means we will prepare the table so that it will be easy to understand. Okay, very easy. Now there are four bases of classification. One is a qualitative base. So it is a qualitative base, simply some quality or attribute will be discussed here. No numerical value. Quantitative means there is some quantitative obviously, so it can be represented in the form of number like a height, weight, age. Geographical base means by geography you can classify the data, for example, like a city, state, country, etc. Now chronological or temporal means simply based on their time of occurrence you classify the data, like a year, week, month. So it is also called as chronological or the temporal base is also called as the time series data. For example, what is sale of the State Bank of India, right? What is sale of company in 1 year, 2 year, like that. Very easy, right? So we have already learned there are 4 bases: the qualitative, quantitative, geographical, or chronological, or the temporal. Next, type of classification. What is a one-way classification? One-way classification means simply we will classify the data based on one characteristic only, one filter. Two-way means we will classify the data based on 2 characteristics, like a two-way filter. And multi-way means simply we will classify the data based on more than 2 filter, right? One way means simply the population divided. So what is Hindu population? Out of total population, what is Hindu population plus male population? And multi-way means out of total population, which are the Hindu, which are male plus literate. So we apply more filter. So more the filter, it's very simple, right? One way means only one filter. Two way means 2 filter. Multi-way means more than 2 filter, right? Okay. So friends, here we will stop. We are having the Android application. You can download the Android application Bankers Zone CAIIB. Then you simply search at the Play Store Bankers Zone CAIIB to download the application from the Play Store. If you need any help, we are having the number 9054538247. This is our WhatsApp number, right? If you need any help during the preparation, if you are having any doubt when you are downloading the application, obviously you need to contact us on this WhatsApp number. Thank you, friends.